evening. Good evening, Sir B. Good evening, my dear and fellow classmates. This is Monechi Pecas, and here is my video presentation. What is the meaning of life for you? It pertains to some significance of living or existence in general. A lot of people may relate questions that includes why are we here? What is life all about? What is the purpose of existence? And there are a lot of people who have proposed answers to these questions from many different cultural and ideological backgrounds. And yet, the search for meaning has produced much philosophical, scientific, theological, and metaphysical speculation throughout the history. But for a young doctor, his new bride, his mother, father, and brother were arrested and taken to a concentration camp. It was events that occurred there and three other camps that led that young doctor prisoner to realize the significance of meaningfulness in life. One of the earliest events to drive him home the point was the loss of his manuscript, his entire work, and throughout this ordeal, he could not help but see that among those given a chance for survival, it was those who held on to vision of the future, whether it be a significant task before them or a return to their loved ones that were most likely to survive their suffering. It would be, in fact, the meaningfulness that could be found in suffering itself that would most impress him. And that young doctor, of course, is Viktor Emil Frank. He believes that life is not primarily a quest for pleasure, as Freud believed, or a quest for power, as Alfred Adler thought, but a quest for meaning. The meaning of life differs from man to man. What matters, therefore, is not the meaning of life in general, but rather the specific meaning of a person's life at a given moment. Everyone's task is as unique as his specific opportunity to implement it. Ultimately, man should not ask what the meaning of his life is, but rather he must recognize that it is he who is asked. In a word, each man is questions in life, and he can only answer to life by answering for his own life. To life, he can only respond by being responsible. Thus, logotherapy sees in responsibleness in very essence of human existence. And logotherapy, in a nutshell, is like this. A logos is a Greek word which denotes meaning. Frank identified three main ways of realizing meaning in life. First, for creative values. Second, for experiential values. And third, for attitudinal values. And logotherapy focuses on the meaning of human existence as well on man's search for such a meaning. According to this therapy, this striving to find a meaning in one's life is the primary motivation force in man. This meaning is unique and specific in that it must and can be fulfilled by him alone. Only then does it achieve a significance which will satisfy his own way to meaning. To be sure, man's search for meaning may arouse inner tension rather than inner equilibrium. However, precisely such tension is an indispensable prerequisite of mental health. And this mental health is based on a certain degree of tension. And that tension between what one has already achieved and what one still ought to accomplish, or the gap between what one is and what one should become. Such tension is inherent in human being and therefore is indispensable to mental well-being. Another thought and another significant work that is known from Mr. and Sir Viktor Frankl is known as existential vacuum. And this vacuum is a widespread phenomenon on the 20th century and even up till now. It may be due to a twofold loss which man has had to undergo since he became a true human being. The loss of some of the basic animal instinct in which an animal's behavior is embedded and by which it is secured. That tradition which buttresses his behavior are now rapidly diminishing. No instinct tells him what he has to do, and no tradition tells him what he ought to do. Sometimes he does not even know what he wishes to do. Instead, he either wishes to do what other people do or conformism, or he does what other people wish him to do, or totalitarianism. The existential value manifests itself mainly in a state of boredom. You just live without meaning. You just do what other people think and what other people want you to be without even having meaning for yourself. And these problems are growing increasingly crucial for progressive automation, which probably led to an enormous increase in the leisure hours available to the average worker. The pity of it is that many of these will not know what to do with all their newly acquired free time. Thus, the individual relies mainly upon the action of others and neglects the meaning of his own personal life. Hence, he sees his own life as meaningless and falls into the existential vacuum, feeling inner void. That's why progressive automation causes increasing alcoholism, juvenile delinquency, and even suicide. And last but not the least, the significant work that has an impression and impact for me is known as self-transcendence. And psychiatrist Viktor Frankl believed that self-transcendence was an important step in human development, a step which must have happened before Maslow's lauded stage of self-actualization. And for the picture, we can see that it is the most or top significant part of anyone else's needs. And more one and the more one forgets himself by giving himself to a cause, to serve or another person to love, the more human he is and the more he actualizes himself. Self actualization is possibly only as a side effect of self transcendence. It is ultimately, however, experiential, creative, and attitudinal values are merely surface manifestation of something much more fundamental, which he calls suprameaning or transcendence. Here we see Frank's religious bent. Suprameaning is the idea that there is, in fact, ultimate meaning in life, meaning that it is not dependent on others, on our projects, or even on our own dignity. It is a reference to God and spiritual meaning. These sets of runs existentialism apart from the others because, for example, Saturn and other atheistic existentialists suggest that life is ultimately meaningless and we must find the courage to face that meaninglessness. Sartre says we must learn to endure ultimate meaninglessness, but Frank instead says that we need to learn to endure our inability to fully comprehend ultimate meaningfulness, for logos is deeper than logic. Again, it was his experiences in the death camps that led him to his conclusion. In spite of all the enforced physical and mental primitiveness of the life in a concentration camp, it was possible for a spiritual life to deepen. They were able to retreat some of their terrible surroundings to a life of inner riches and spiritual freedom. And for Viktor Frankl, this certainly does retreat from their terrible surrounding to a life of inner riches and spiritual freedom. It is expressed in the future of an illusion, which he says religion is the universal compulsive neurosis of mankind. It should be understood that Frank's ideas about religion and spirituality are considerably broader than most. His God is not the God of the narrow mind, not the God of one denomination or another. It is not even the God of institutional religion. God is very much a God of the inner human being, a God of the heart. Even the atheist or the agnostic, he points out, may accept the idea of transcendence without making use of the word God. Allow me to let Frank speak for himself. This unconscious religiousness reveals that by our phenomenological analysis, it is to be understood as a latent relation to transcendence inherent in man. If one prefers, he might conceive of this relation in terms of relationship between immanent self and transcendence, though. However, one wishes to formulate it. We are confronted with what I should like to term the transcendent unconscious. This concept means no more or less than the man has always stood in an intentional relation to transcendence, even if only an unconscious level. If one calls the intentional referent as of such an unconscious relation to God, it is apt to speak of an unconscious God. It must be able to understand that this unconscious God is not anything that like the archetypes Jung talks about. This God is clearly transcendent and yet profoundly personal. He is there according to Frank within each of us, and it is merely matter of our acknowledging that presence that will bring us supra meaning. On the other hand, turning away from God is the ultimate source of all the ills we have already discussed. Once the angel in us is repressed, he turns into demon. And as for personal notes, I really chose Viktor Frankl because during this pandemic, I really thought of asking, you know, from time to time during self introspection that what is the meaning of my life during these 30 years of experience. I really would try from time to time to ask myself, why am I here? What is my purpose in life? Why do I exist? And what is my difference to other people? And this really helped me to understand my life. And one of the quotes that really try to speak up for me is a lot of quotes that Viktor Frank would really try to share. He had a lot of books which he tried to help other people to understand their life. And one of the things that give an impact to me as well is when he says that everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude of to any given set of circumstances to choose one's own way. And this really proved how Viktor Frank survived the concentration camp because even if he's still suffering, he find meaning. And during this pandemic, a lot of negative events have happened to anyone, even for me. And it really helps me to choose my own way to respond and to choose on how to respond on my life and um to have meaning, to still gain insight from all the experiences that I have. And with that, thank you so much for listening.